Honestly, the best thing that this show has given me before I had even seen it on Broadway was the realization that you can take this title format and use it to explain the plot of every other musical ever written. For example, how to be green in Oz, how to have three dads in Greece, how to be creepy in an opera house. I'm telling you, they literally all work. Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Joe and I am obsessed with all things theatre. I am a theatre-themed content creator here on YouTube and also a professional freelance theatre critic. And I recently went to New York City to go and see a bunch of Broadway shows for the third time in the last 12 months because, like I said, I am obsessed. And one of the shows that I was most interested to see is the one we're going to be talking about today, the brand new Broadway musical How to Dance in Ohio. I love me holding up the playbill here as if I'm not wearing literally all of the merch. I love merch, if you couldn't already tell. Now, this show opened right at the end of 2023 at the Belasco Theatre, where it is currently playing, but it will soon be closing, sadly. It has announced it will close early at the venue. There are many new musicals coming to Broadway this season, and it's harder for little shows with no obvious commercial viability, by which I mean not featuring big starry names like Hugh Jackman, not based on big properties like Back to the Future. It's harder for those shows to get noticed and generate ticket sales. That being said, it is not closed yet. Get yourself to the Belasco Theatre. The performance I saw had the most energetic, responsive, emotive crowd. It was so cool. Now, in today's video, I'm going to be letting you know all of my thoughts about this show. We're going to talk a little bit about why it might be closing, but for the most part, I'm going to be letting you know what I think of the material, of the performances, and whether or not it all works. Because a musical based on a documentary such as this is an unusual concept. We're going to talk more about that. If you would like to know more about the theatre-going experience, what the rest of the merch looks like, what the inside of the Belasco Theatre auditorium is like, then stay tuned. All of that footage is coming in the second part of my 3-part travel vlog series. The first part is already here on my channel. You can go and watch that. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next 2. And finally, if you want to see even more theatre-themed content on social media, you can find me on other platforms. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, X, LinkedIn, all of the usual places. And if you yourself have seen How to Dance in Ohio on Broadway, or if you saw it on its pre-Broadway run, or if you're perhaps a fan of the documentary, comment down below with all of your thoughts. And while you're there, try and tell me what your favourite musical is using this formula, how to blank in blank. I just think it'll be fun. In the meantime, let's discuss what I thought of How to Dance in Ohio, right after this clip of the show's Broadway curtain call. Okie dokie, so as mentioned, How to Dance in Ohio is a 2023 Broadway musical based on a 2015 documentary. That documentary, which was directed by Alexandra Shiva, follows a group of autistic young adults who are preparing for a spring formal in order to further develop their social skills. It predominantly follows 3 young women who are also dramatized in the musical, as well as the group leader, Dr. Emilio Amigo, who also features. Now, as we learn very quickly, the musical is a narrative adaptation of the documentary. We have added characters, we have developed other things for dramatic effect, but it very much utilizes the concept portrayed in the documentary as its main plot. In this stage adaptation, we follow 7 autistic young adults who all belong to the Amigo family counselling group, as well as some of their parents, Dr. Amigo and his daughter. The members of the group are all at different points in their lives. Some have jobs, some are working to try and move out of their parents' homes, others are thinking of going to college, others are already at college, exploring relationships, discerning their identities, beginning to use social media, and the group is also welcoming a new member named Meredith. And in response to a throwaway comment that she makes, inspired by her fascination with all things Australian, Dr. Amigo decides that it would be a great idea to host a spring dance for the group members to give them something to work towards, a sort of a rite of passage, and an opportunity to, just like in the documentary, further develop their social skills by learning how to ask people if they want to go with them to an event, by learning how to dance in Ohio. And you begin to see what this is, and also where a little bit of the tension comes from, because this is a startling concept to many of the group members. Add in some subplots, a little bit of tension between Dr. Amigo and his daughter, who has recently returned from Juilliard, where she was training in ballet, but she's like broken her ankle. Some of the group members are meanwhile facing challenges in their relationships, in their friendships, in their workplaces, with their parents. And through all of this and the perspectives of these 7 different characters, we do get a fairly varied and nuanced look at the autistic experience of young adults. But that also creates dramatic challenges, which we're going to talk about. Now, one of the reasons that this show is noteworthy is because it was kind of the last thing that legendary director Hal Prince was working on prior to his death. He had been a dramaturg in this project and he was set to direct it. Sadly, he passed away before the show could be fully staged, which left many people deeply curious about the result. What was it that he saw in this material, and what did the finished product end up being like? Well, let me tell you. So this show is all at once heartwarming and joyous and affecting and deeply, deeply sweet and easily rewatchable and exciting and simultaneously frustrating. Because there is so much good in this. There is so much great in this. In fact, it has 5-star moments. It has 5-star performances. It has some 5-star songs. But it also perhaps has a 3-star structure, an occasional inability to utilize its material to its full effectiveness, perhaps a 3-star direction even by Sammy Camold. And if I'm being completely honest, slightly limiting aims. I'm going to explain what I mean by all of this, but you understand where my 4-star rating comes from. There is so much of this that I loved because it really works. It soars. It's not just flashes of brilliance. There are entire scenes and songs that work on such a great level, and if the entire show was that consistently strong, this would be a frontrunner for the Best New Musical Tony Award for 2024. However, it is let down by other parts of the show, which are few and far between but are worth talking about. So let me start with some big picture stuff, because this is a pretty traditional narrative in terms of a coming of age story, in terms of depicting, you know, characters who experience differences and adversities, and this man who brings them together who they trust, but then having earned their trust, he loses their trust because he's, you know, distracted by this pointless romantic subplot and a little bit of his own ego, and he's having this frustrating back and forth with his daughter. But the way the actual thing starts is with the 7 autistic actors who play the show's autistic characters coming to the forefront of the stage and explaining what the show is going to be like. This is something that happens during relaxed performances, which is a version of the show in which the lighting is perhaps different, in which the sounds are quieter, in which effects are utilized differently, but also at the beginning of the show, cast members will come out and speak to the audience to let them know what it is that they're going to see, who they are, the characters that they are playing, just preparing them and giving them an additional means to understand what it is that they are about to see. So that happens in this show, which gives it an additional accessibility, very important for this material, but it also allows us to celebrate the fact that we have 7 autistic actors playing 7 autistic characters. This is groundbreaking to an extent I can't even explain. This is huge for Broadway. It's such a positive step forward for representation. It is glass ceiling shattering, and if nothing else, during its short time at the Belasco Theatre, that will represent a huge achievement by the musical How to Dance in Ohio. And it's also a really killer way to start the show, because the show's best asset is these characters. They are so winning, the performers are so endearing, they are so charming, and we instantly fall in love with all of them in this moment. It is so well delivered, it is so well written, that little introductory section, it's coy, it's playful, it earns your investment even though the fourth wall is like pre-broken. However, as I'm then watching the transition from this into the narrative that I just described, this kind of pedestrian take on these characters and this story, I started to wonder if there wasn't something more genre pushing, more forward thinking and more interesting that we could do with letting these characters be the narrators of their own story, or at least seeing it from their perspective, rather than seeing a story in which they are othered out of necessity so that we can understand the challenges that they uniquely experience in the workplace and in education and at various points throughout the show, and how they are sort of marginalized needlessly. I wonder if we could tell the same story and convey the same ideas by seeing the world through their eyes and from their perspective, and having the adults, whether that's Dr. Amigo, whether that's their parents, whether that's the strangers that they encounter, portrayed in the way that they perceive them. I think what we're missing here is a sense of an autistic perspective, and that isn't really echoed within the show's writing team. And if that were the case, I wonder if we could do something a little bit more interesting. While we're talking big picture stuff, here's another one of the larger issues that the show has, which is focusing primarily on Dr. Amigo. Because like I told you, the 7 characters who make up the group's participants are really winning. They are the best asset. We kind of instantly fall in love with them, and every moment that they have on stage is a brilliant one. Whether it's the friendship between Jessica and Caroline, whether it's learning more about Meredith's interests, whether it's Remy trying to film their cosplay tutorial videos, it's all hugely charming and really great character building material. Those little segments are very well written. However, the issue that we begin to face is sharing the duration of a 2-act musical between 7 different characters and developing each of those characters equally. That would be hard enough if they weren't all reduced to smaller supporting roles, because we have this recurring plot with Dr. Amigo, played by Cesar Samayoa. Because while we're all getting ready for the dance, and while we keep seeing these insights into the very varied lives of the group members, we keep circling back to his nerves and his worries about what the dance is going to be, and then you have this whole subplot. So we learn early on that he has recently divorced from his wife. His daughter has returned home from Juilliard. She's helping him with the group. They're learning how to dance. She was training to be a dancer. You see the parallel there, which is honestly all it needs to be, and it gets taken way further than that for no good reason. But as she reckons with whether she even wants to return to dance, and he fails to acknowledge that that's something that she ought to be able to choose for herself, we also have this creeping romantic plotline, because he is contacted separately by 2 different journalists. One of them is a blogger, one of them writes for a newspaper, and they are both interested in the spring formal dance that the group is going to have. So he holds a group interview with them, and then subsequently perceives an invitation from the newspaper reporter to be a date. Meanwhile, we come to understand that the blogger's understanding of autism is a very reductive and regressive one, because he's instantly using terminology like suffers from autism. All the while, we invest a lot of material in finding out how Dr. Amigo feels about all of this, and he is just not the most important character in this story, nor the most interesting character in this story. And I find almost all of his plot points frustrating. Like, he is beneficial to the story, he is important to the story, but he doesn't need to be our principal protagonist. Which isn't to say every one of the 7 group members should all be the leading character. There are 2 that sort of begin to emerge but don't quite get all the way there, because they're having to share so much space with Dr. Amigo and his daughter. Those characters are Drew and Meredith. Meredith being the new newest member of the group, Drew being a young man who is deciding which college he wants to go to. There's a little bit of a romantic subplot here, but they both get to sing more than the other characters in the group. They kind of feel like they could be the leading characters whose principal plotline we follow, while we have the others as supporting characters around them. I just feel like that would be a better version of this plot if they were allowed to come more readily to the forefront throughout the show. In fact, before seeing this musical, I had assumed that Drew was the lead. The other overview comment that I could make would be about the songs, because there are some really winning songs, which I'm going to tell you about in the next section. There are just as many songs that probably could have been rewritten if the show had had further development. It had an out-of-town run, which was sadly cut short, and then they perhaps optimistically moved the show to Broadway. This feels like a show that really would have benefited from an off-Broadway run, and there are many spaces in New York where this could have played and probably ought to have done. It could have been further developed. We could have reworked some of this material, because when the songs are great, they are so great, and the others are conspicuously fine. So let me tell you some more positive and negative aspects of this show. Like I told you, some of the material is really winning. Take, for example, the song So Much in Common. I love this song. This had been in my head since I heard it at the show's press launch. This happens early on in the show's second act, and I just about lost my mind, because from having listened to the song, I had assumed it was the Act 1 finale, and it's not. And I thought, oh, when I see it in context, it will make sense, and it doesn't. This is the most obvious Act 1 finale I have perhaps ever heard in a musical. It is so clearly the Act 1 finale. It sets everything up well, because what's happening is you have all of these different characters planning how they are going to ask the person that they want to ask to the dance. So that leaves us at the end of Act 1 feeling optimistic and hopeful and excited, reminding us what the timeline of the show is, what we're counting down to, which gives us a little bit of a source of tension. We're also wondering what they're going to say and what's going to happen. That is the perfect way to lead us into the second act, which would all take place in like the 24 hours leading up to the dance itself. There is no good reason for this to come in the beginning of the second act but not be the Act 2 opener. Also, it slaps. Like, this is just such a great song. Another of the best songs is Building Momentum. This is the perfect 11 o'clock number, which thankfully is in the right place. It must be said that Liam Pearce, who plays Drew, hits this squarely out of the park. He has the most delicious voice, and he sings so passionately and so emphatically as he is jumping around the stage, excitably, just joyously delivering this number. It's such a fist pump moment. You really root for him as he is singing this song, and it's just infectiously fun. It is also a compelling melodic hook, which is important. At the same time, I don't know that every one of his lyrics in the multiple songs that he sings beautifully needs to relate to his special interest. So I will clarify at this point, as I ought to have done earlier in this video. I am not autistic, and I'm certainly not an expert on autism, but there is this concept within it where autistic people have a special interest, which is a topic that they are particularly interested in. And for Drew, this is like physics. Like, he talks about like waves and electricity and electronics and sciencey things that I don't understand, but he does. Good for him. Good for you, Drew. And this is used as a kind of a metaphorical angle into many of his songs, rather than singing about his emotions directly, which would be great if it wasn't slightly overutilized, because each one of these characters gets, if not a special interest, then their one thing. Everyone kind of has this one trait. Caroline just got a boyfriend and she's really excited about that. Remy is a cosplayer and so sings exclusively about cosplay and wearing costumes, and sings an emotional song in the second act which uses the metaphor of wearing a costume as an insight into the emotional lyrics. We see a pattern here. Meredith does the same thing with her interest in Australia and historic continental drift. She sings a song called Unlikely Animals about Australia. She sings another song called Drift. And the whole special interest concept begins to feel like something we lean on a little bit too heavily, which I think would matter less if each of those characters could be developed a little more, which again is the symptom of the problem caused by spending too much time with Dr. Amigo and his daughter. To circle back to that once again, I really, and I apologise to this fictional character, but I do not care if she goes back to Juilliard and does ballet or not. Like, make your own decision. The most frustrating plot points are the ones that could be easily resolved with open communication, and this man is meant to be a doctor working with autistic teens, and he can't hear his own, like, adult daughter telling him that she doesn't want to be a ballet dancer anymore, that she would rather, like, follow in his footsteps and join him and make this a family business. Like, it's completely absurd that he's so obtusely against this. He's like, no, you can't be a doctor, you must dance. Another song I really love is a song sung by two of the girls' mothers as they are taking them dress shopping at Macy's. The two girls are best friends, and the mothers are reflecting on their own prom experiences, and the hook we come back to lyrically is, I want a picture of my daughter getting ready for the dance. And I think that's a lovely thing to take out of this. They acknowledge the kind of opportunities and experiences that their children may not be able to have that they did, and kind of the difference between their experience of it and the way that their daughters will, but that's not the main focus. The main focus is how much it will mean to them to have that memory of their daughters getting ready for the dance, and I think that is a beautiful angle into this song. I also appreciate seeing that part of the story because I think it's important, and we also have some beautiful spoken scenes between Meredith and her widower father, who is just doing his best to try and support and understand her. Very, very well played by Andrew Kober. But with the mothers and the song getting ready for the dance, I appreciate that we don't have a scene amongst it or leading into it that kind of focuses on, like, their struggles and, like, how hard it is for them to be raising autistic teens, because I think that's another reductive perspective, and that's not what I want to see in this show or this story. I think it's valuable to show a little bit of their parents, but I don't want that to become our main focus. Now, that has just reminded me of another sizable issue within this show, which mostly affects the first act, because the songs are decent enough. What stops them from building momentum, haha, is the fact that almost every song in the first act seems to break for dialogue multiple times. This, I think, is just a direction issue. It's obviously also a writing issue, but as they were developing the show, a conversation needed to be had that all of these songs are being inhibited by pausing for dialogue. It's something you can do in musical theatre. Like a great writing team with whoever is writing the book and whoever is writing the score can have these exchanges between music and dialogue. We see it and hear it often, but we don't need for it to happen in every single song multiple times, because then we just can't really get into that musical groove. We struggle to enjoy the songs because everything keeps getting interrupted. And it's a good enough technique. When it works really well. It's like a musical theatre handshake. But if you shake someone's hand continuously for an hour, that's not a good business meeting, that's just strange. I liked the set design by Robert Brill. I thought it was like a sunnier, more optimistic version of the Dear Evan Hansen set. I did like this staging effect where we had a revolve in the middle of the stage and we were kind of spinning people out and shifting between different scenes and showing different parallels. That's how you develop 7 characters simultaneously, by showing what they have in common, by using the same material or the same song or the same scene to show 2 different moments simultaneously and like the similarities between them. I will also say, and this seems like as good a time as any to say this show absolutely made me cry. It is very, very affecting. And this story with these characters, it has so many heartbreaking and beautiful moments. There's a character I haven't spoken about as much yet called Mel, and they have a job working at a pet store that they take very seriously, and there's this one really heartbreaking scene where they are just doing their best to try and do their job and try and fulfill what they believe is the extent of their responsibilities, and their confusion is sort of maliciously misinterpreted by their manager, who then scolds them to the point of tears. It's heartbreaking to watch, honestly. After this, we see Mel reconnecting with Dr. Amigo's daughter. They used to be friends and had kind of drifted apart when she went to go and be a ballet dancer. You've heard all this already. And the scene in which Mel offers them support on the decision that they are trying to make about their future and about their career is another really valuable one, and one I really appreciate them putting in, because here you have this young girl who's working with her father, who is trying to help guide and steer the lives of these other people, and so you then have this role reversal situation. I really love that scene. It's very well acted. And the whole ending made me cry. Like, even though I think we spend too much time with Dr. Amigo, just seeing his response to the dance and to the students. I used to be an educator. I used to work with autistic students and students with various special educational needs and entire classes of them. And so those were the moments where the show spoke the most relatably and profoundly to me. Okie dokie, so let's talk about some of these performances. So, Cesar Samayoa, like I mentioned, plays Dr. Amigo. What I really love about his performance is the moments where he is interacting with the young adults in his counselling program. You can really feel the affection that he has for them, and his passion and his care. Like, the gravity of how much that means to him really comes across. That's kind of paramount in his performance, and that is important because there is a moment in the second act where he kind of crosses a professional line. He also does a great job of characterizing and performing the more personal material with his character. That's not material I particularly enjoy, but he does a good job in playing it. Haven Burton and Alicia Kersey both sound fantastic as two of the girls' mothers singing that song that I told you about before. They don't have a wealth of material beyond that. Christina Sastra plays Dr. Amigo's daughter. I like her in her scenes with her father. I love her in the scenes with Mel. That interaction is something I wanted to see even more of, because that was really interesting. And a standout within the supporting cast, Andrew Kober, who plays Meredith's father. Those scenes were painful and beautiful and real and honest and raw because of the way that he was playing them. A very vulnerable, a very honest performance, just terrific, and strong vocals as well. But now let's talk about the real stars of the show, the 7 performers who play the show's 7 autistic characters. Starting with Liam Pearce, who I think is the most obvious breakout star of this show. If Dear Evan Hansen was still running on Broadway, he would be going straight into that next, because he has that kind of a contemporary musical theatre voice with the trembly vibrato beautiful tone thing. Sounds brilliant, but also does a great job of playing a really wide emotional spectrum. There's one comedy moment where he is reciting an email that he sent to Dr. Amigo, and Dr. Amigo is reading it a different way to his daughter, and so Liam plays the same little spoken section in 2 completely different ways. That's very funny. And it's his enthusiasm at the end when he is delivering, building momentum. It's the standout moment of the show. He lands it with such zest that you just fall in love with him if you hadn't already. Sort of on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Madison Kopek, who is playing Meredith, who is considerably more guarded and less emotionally forthcoming, but we get a lot of insights into her thoughts and her world and her fascinations, and she has one of the most brilliant narrative journeys throughout the show, where her character gets to really evolve, and you see this slight progression leading up to that. Everything is foreshadowed. It doesn't feel like an unbelievable transition at the end when, you know, she's suddenly open to new experiences and new things that she previously was very opposed to. It doesn't feel unbelievable or sudden because it's been foreshadowed with these slight changes in her character that she plays opposite Liam, that she plays opposite Andrew. The subtlety of her performance, fantastic. Then you have Amani Russell, who gives perhaps my favourite acting performance of all of them. Like, the vocal is not the most confident thing, but I actually enjoy that for this character, because I'm here to tell you something about musical theatre vocals. Not everyone needs to sound like a strong, belty, Jimmy Award-winning Dear Evan Hansen. Like, I don't need that from every single character on Broadway, because if your character is not confident in the things that you are projecting and the things that you are saying, and this is a character who uses text-to-speech on their phone to articulate themselves sometimes because they struggle to get their point across, then it stands to reason that they shouldn't sing with massive belting confidence either, especially when they're singing to another character. If they were singing there in a monologue, that's one thing, but when they are singing to someone, that ought to reflect the characterization as well. For Amani, it's the acting where they really deliver the gold, and are also responsible for some of the show's heaviest and most upsetting scenes. The rest of the characters get a lot of comic relief, none more so than Connor Tague. He plays a character called Tommy, whose greatest aspiration is just to be able to get his driver's license so that he can drive his brother's new truck. But he has so many brilliant asides in the group meetings and so many fantastic facial expressions. He has this great recurring gag where he reveals to the audience that he's learned if he raises his eyebrows, it makes him look like he's interested in what someone's saying, even if he isn't, so he can then deploy that throughout the rest of the show. He's one that we fall in love with very quickly. Another is Desmond Luis Edwards, who plays Remy. Instantly lovable, like, my gosh, just radiating joy and positivity as this character who loves cosplay and is starting their own social media presence to share that with the internet and is only slightly wary of negative comments, but just so charismatic, so likable, a wonderful performance. And then finally, the group is completed by the sensational double act from Amelia Faye and Ashley Wool, who play best friends Caroline and Jessica. Amelia as Caroline plays this very sweet infatuation. She's just got her first boyfriend, and that's kind of all she wants to talk about. Ashley, meanwhile, really tickled me as Jessica because she's very committed and she's very driven with what she wants. She wants to be able to be self-sufficient and move out of her mother's house, and once she gets it in her head that she wants to ask a certain person to the dance, that becomes her new agenda, but she's hugely indifferent to the idea that she can't control the outcome of that question and that that person gets to make up their mind for themselves. And her delivery of the line when she says, "I don't like that at all," it's just wonderful. Also, I am so obsessed with her vocal performance of "Tommy, we have so much in common," as she sings it in multiple different keys in the song So Much in Common. I think she's a star. In fact, I think they are all stars. I think How to Dance in Ohio has launched 7 shining stars into the Broadway industry, and they are all talents to watch. Heartbreakingly, this show will not go on to have the success that it deserves. If I was on Broadway for longer than a week, I absolutely would have gone to see this show again. For sure, there are structural things that could be improved. There are some easy ways to make this show better, with moving songs around, with prioritizing different characters, with cutting certain bits of material, but it is enduringly just so uplifting, so positive, joyous, fun, wonderful, gonna make you cry, gonna make you laugh. You're gonna have a great time. Also, kind of like the perfect show to take young people to take schools groups to. Like, there's so much that this could have been for so many people, but its early closure doesn't take away from what it has achieved permanently for representation, for autistic performers, for autistic theatre goers on Broadway. I'm proud of How to Dance in Ohio, and you should be as well. Those have been my thoughts on How to Dance in Ohio. I am so intrigued to hear what you thought. Let me know in the comment section down below if you've seen this show, if you have listened to the cast recording. That's out. You can go and listen to that now. If you can't get to Broadway to go and see this, you can at least listen to the show. And if you want to know a little bit more about what the theatre-going experience is like, remember to subscribe to my channel and stay tuned for the next installment of my Broadway trip vlog. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you have enjoyed. There's going to be more Broadway reviews coming very soon. And in the meantime, I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day.
For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!